Good evening, welcome to Exegete This, your UK Christian podcast. My name is Metin, this is Stephen, and this week, Stephen, something's been bothering you. You've got an article for us.
Yep, something that I came across. I heard some people discussing this. I thought I want to find out the details of it, and so I read an article on the Christian Institute website about a recent story. So I'm going to read a few bits from that to set the context. So the headline is: Police Scotland visited domestic abuse charity boss to check thinking behind women's safety tweets. So there is a bit of a backstory to it. Right. Another person had said something and it framed this context. And basically this lady does a really good job, as far as I can tell, running a domestic abuse hostel, somewhere where women can, and it's only women, biological women, can go and be guaranteed that there are only biological women there and they can be safe from any kind of male violence or male presence that might even make them feel uncomfortable. Right. That's what they provide, and unfortunately in this world that is a necessary service, and I'm grateful that these places exist that women can go to for those sorts of things. And to me it's a no-brainer that there should be no men, biological men, there. Unfortunately, that's...
Well, you've kind of hinted at it there by using biological as a key word. Yeah. So I can imagine what you're going to say next.
Yep, so basically after stating that was her position, that it should only be biological women that go to this refuge, a complaint was made, which the police followed up. So I have here a quote from. Let me read you the first paragraph. Police Scotland has been reported to the Equalities and Human Rights Commission after a senior officer implied the head of a domestic abuse charity was guilty of a hate crime for upholding the reality of biological sex. So this is already jumping over the story to say that as a response to the police response, this has been escalated because people are not happy with the police response. But clearly then the police did respond by going to see this woman. They turned up at her house and interviewed her, and their reason was because she was guilty of a hate crime for upholding the reality of biological sex. And here is the interesting quote from the police officer himself. When asked to defend its actions, the force's Assistant Chief Constable Gary Ritchie said, "Hate crime and discrimination of any kind is deplorable and entirely unacceptable." So,
that's all. There's so many problems with that sentence.
It's a problematic sentence. Yeah.
Hate crime, hate. Hate is not a crime. Hate is not always sinful.
Well, yes, because we make a distinction between sins and crimes, for a start.
Because they're sort of looking into someone's heart to say, you intended hate with this and you need to check what you're thinking. The thought police are coming round.
They are the thought police, but they're also the how other people hear it police. So if someone else hears it as hateful, then it's hateful. So even if you didn't intend it to be hateful,
it's hateful.
But someone else said it was hateful, it could be a hate crime. So it is the thought police, but it's also how those thoughts are or spoken thoughts are acted on.
I guess where I was going with, hate is not necessarily hate is not always a sin. It's like there's lots of things that are sins that are not crimes that that are not within and Christians who believe in having a Christian nation or a Christian state, that they wouldn't police every sin. Even the most extreme, I don't know of any that would say all these sins have to be policed.
No,
but God hates lies. There's lots of times when hate is not a sin.
So hate is definitely not a sin for God.
Yeah.
definitionally, because if he does it, it's not a sin. But also we see God actually saying that he hates things. And there's a quote, I'm pretty sure it's from David, where he says, I hate them with a perfect hatred, which hate thee, O God. And so there you have, and this is hard to do, a righteous man reflecting God's righteous hatred. And so you're right, hate isn't necessarily a sin, even though I think, like anger, because there is some overlap, God is righteously angry, God righteously hates things. It is a very difficult reaction, emotion to get right. It's much easier, I think, to get wrong by being angry than be right by being angry. But I think there are times, because Ephesians says, be ye angry and sin not. So it's okay, and at times it's right, but it's very hard.
But this really isn't in that realm, is it? This
is not even close.
This is just a perceived offence that someone's taken. Probably not even that group. It's probably on someone else's behalf. Someone's offended on someone else's behalf, probably.
Yep.
Which happens a lot. But
yeah. So for a start, hate, I don't think should be a crime in that sense, because it's a thought. But also, I disagree that this is hate crime. Now, he says it's discrimination of any kind. And again, like discrimination is fine.
Yeah, it just means make a choice.
Yeah. Now, some discrimination is sin, and some discrimination isn't sin. Some discrimination is essential and wise. But we now live in times when you can get away with sentences like this, and people go, "Oh yeah, well that's right," because in our heads we insert whatever type of discrimination we think is beyond the pale. So when it says, "Oh, discrimination of any kind is deplorable," and we think, "Oh yeah, that means black people can't use the same drinking fountain as white people," of course that shouldn't have any place in it.
But that's not what these people are thinking.
No, well, clearly
that's not what most people are thinking,
because that's not what they're checking up on.
Yeah.
And so they make these kind of sweeping statements and then apply it to these situations where they really shouldn't. For a start, I don't think they have any reason to be there at all, policing the thoughts and the speeches of people who aren't inciting violence of any sort. And this is so far from being hateful. This is actually compassionate and caring for the people this charity was set up to help. And this is where you get the fact you cannot get away from the fact that in an imperfect world you have to make some of these choices for the benefit of. And are we saying that every man is a threat to every woman? No, we're not. And are we saying that every transgender man who is living as a woman is a threat to women? No, we're not. We're not even saying that. But we're saying that there is a possibility of a biological male being stronger and more willing to do things to a biological female. And that is the track record. Most domestic violence is committed by men against women, not all, but most. By the nature of the biology, sexual attacks are almost always men against women. And women who've been through that or are in the process of leaving that should be able to be protected. And that does mean discriminating against men. And I'm glad they do.
Yeah.
And they should do it. But the police now think that they can go and police people's thoughts
in that area.
And it's very troubling. And I think it's troubling in this realm of women's spaces, which I think are very important. But it's also, for me, it was a bit of a heads up that if the police think they can get involved in this kind of thought, what other kinds of thought can they get involved in? And I think Christians need to genuinely be aware and be prepared for their thoughts if they're expressed in a public manner like we are or on social media, that your thoughts and your words, either current or historical, if it can be dug up from 10 years ago, they can be used against you, and the police might well take an active interest. And Christians need to be prepared for that. And I don't think that should make Christians retreat. You might choose how carefully you want to phrase things and what battles you want to pick. but it helps to be prepared to know what's coming. Because
Yeah.
speaking as someone who has had the police knock on his door for what I consider to be something Christian, we always knew it was a possibility, but it's very different when you open the door and the police are still there.
Yeah. This isn't the first time this has been going on for a while, though, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
This probably might not be hugely revolutionary to people, but there have been people shouldn't be afraid.
Definitely.
First of all,
yeah,
because this is foundational to a huge, society's built on these distinctions. We order our society around these categories and build things upon them, and we're taking those out from underneath us and radically changing these things. But I was going to say something, but I can't remember. Was there any more to that?
There is a bit more to that, but on the Christian side of it, there is a correct Christian response to this, because I don't think this is the only area that the police will take an interest in. I think they will take an interest in, especially what we say about anything to do with sexuality. But not only. I remember talking to a friend of mine who was a teacher, and they told me that the way I expressed some of my views about obeying God rather than the state, probably should be reported to the Prevent strategy, because it's terrorism. It's one of the flag. Do you put your religion above your allegiance to your country? It's like, well, yeah, obviously. Like that's for me, that's a no-brainer. And yet they wanted to bring in this British charter, and
who said that should be?
It was a teacher who was been told, like, these are things to watch out for, because teachers have to go through this training, how to spot radicalised children in your class.
Right.
Do they talk about like this being more important than this, and that sort of thing? And this is a flag. I can't remember the exact, because it was basically when we were meeting in the lockdowns, and if the police came, I would have said something along the lines of, well, you're welcome to stay or you're welcome to go, but you have no authority over this meeting, because it's called in the name of Jesus, and anything you do against that, you'll have to answer to him for. We won't resist you or that sort of thing, but I don't recognise your authority here. And to say that you don't recognise the police's authority because of your God's authority, your religion's, that's extremism. Okay, fine, then I'm an extremist. So it might not be sexuality where they come after your thoughts. It could be in that realm of obedience to Christ or disagreement with the state. It might come in an area that we as yet don't expect. I mean, it could come right down to how you discipline your children or anything like that. So, but there is a Christian response, because it's important that we are right when we talk about these things. So if the police are going to come and say you've done this and it's a hate crime or whatever, it matters that what we've done is right. So if they come, if they came in the lockdowns and we were just having a massive party for no reason, and they said, right, you're in trouble, that would not be suffering as a Christian. So it matters that you're right. But if you are right, Jesus says in Matthew 5:11, "Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you." And knowing that before, that's why Jesus tells you beforehand, blessed are you if this happens to you. You need to know that it might not be easy now, but there is a great reward and it's worth doing it. And then that helps you face the trials with joy. Your heart is always slightly in your mouth the first time you see the police and these sorts of issues, but knowing that there is a God who's in control. And so really helps. So the second part of the article referenced an earlier case because there was a man called Harry Miller, who's himself, I believe, a retired police officer, who in 2019 put out some tweets. And the police came to investigate him for what apparently they told him to check his thinking, and he'd not committed a crime, so they recorded it as a non-crime hate incident, which is a wonderful. In some ways, I admire. I don't know whether you read 1984. There's a guy who has a conversation with Winston. I can't remember his name, but he works in the words department of
Ministry of Truth, is it?
Yeah. And he's the kind of person who is working on the simplification of the language, and he's obviously very clever. And Winston recognises that he's too good at what he's doing,
right?
And he will eventually be removed,
right? Yeah.
Because someone like that can't survive. But like, I admire in the book, you sort of admire his cleverness and his way of thinking, and it's the same with this. I read these sentences and I have to be impressed by the fact that they can string these words together and make these. It's abhorrent, but it is quite impressive. A non-crime hate incident. That's a wonderful sentence. What does it actually mean? And why are the police investigating a non-crime? What was that? And so this guy Harry Miller raised a complaint. He's like, well, I think this procedure is wrong. I think you're wrong to come and talk to me, and you're wrong to record it in the way you did. And he went to the High Court, and the court decided in his favour in 2020 that the police shouldn't, which I'm very grateful for. Good, good results can still happen. That the police shouldn't have been recording it in the way they are, and you'd think that would knock them back a bit. But clearly,
but they're still doing it.
But clearly, they're not. So we can't go to these few cases and say, "Look, this has all been dealt with."
Yeah.
Harry Miller thought that they're not going to take any notice of this because this is what they want to do. And there's plenty of other things that the police could be doing if they wanted to. Yeah, we've been burgled, and they had no interest in coming out to see us. No interest in seeing our car was broken into on another occasion. No interest in coming out. But if we'd have said the wrong thing publicly and someone had reported us, we could get a visit. And so it's a choice. It's like the whole COVID thing. Police made choices about what they did, and they're clearly still choosing to go down this line of policing thought and defining hate. And Christians need to be joyfully aware that we might be on the sharp end of it at some point.
Well, it's good to know that it was judged rightly in court, but that doesn't mean the police are just going to stop straight away. So I guess we can have confidence that the law is still on our side on that point, at least. But
for now,
be wise.
Yeah,
be wise.
So that was the main thing I wanted, was just to think, this is happening. Pray for those people. It'd be good to pray for these women in an awful situation, but also be prepared. Be prepared to do it well.
Right, great, excellent. Thanks for that. We had another little thing that we thought we might do, which is a bit of a step change from that, and just bring up some things in the Bible that you might have not realised are there, or you might have forgotten that they exist, but they're quite funny or they're quite interesting. It's a bit of an odd one. We read a passage in 2 Kings on Sunday evening, and I think everybody laughed in the room when we read it. But
especially with the kids, it was a bit of a sort of surprised laughter. It wasn't like, completely
like,
funny.
That's funny. It's like, whoa, it's funny that it's funny that it's there rather than the thing that actually happens.
And because there is a funny element to it, but there's a not funny element as well. Right. Shall I read it?
Yeah, do you want to read it? So it's 2 Kings chapter 2.
2 Kings 2, verse 23. And when it says he, it's Elisha, the prophet Elisha. Right. And he went up from thence unto Bethel, and as he was going up by the way, there came forth little children out of the city, and mocked him, and said unto him, Go up, thou bald head, go up, thou bald head. That's the funny bit. And he turned back and looked on them, and cursed them in the name of the Lord. And there came forth 2 she-bears out of the wood, and tare 42 children of them. And that's it. And he then carries on his journey.
Yeah.
And there's a number of these bits in 2 Kings and 1 Kings where you're like,
what's that doing there?
did that
That's
just
a bit,
happen?
that's a bit weird.
It does feel a bit weird. And one of the things that, I mean, you don't want to go through the Bible as a book of novelty, just looking for weird things. But one of the things that I want to establish is I believe all of it. And when I run across stuff like this that I don't really understand, we believe it. We believe it happened, and we believe God was in control and knew what he was doing through all of it. But it is a pretty surprising...
Yeah. So sometimes there are some weird things that happen that you just think... You actually have no idea whether it's sort of good or bad. Or you don't. There's no real commentary on it. It's just this weird and awful stuff happened. No comment, basically. But there's this one. The prophet sort of turns around and curses them in the name of the Lord, and then 2 bears come out. So it's not quite like that.
Yeah.
But we talked about it a little bit, and at first I was like, well, you're not quite sure. I mean, it says little children there, which when you read it back, I just thought, it does say little children. I was thinking you're not necessarily sure the age of the children, but it does say little children. You're not quite sure, but you're still, I guess, not sure. They came out of the city, so they're not just...
Exactly. They're not toddlers, not babes in arms.
Not babies.
Yeah. It's interesting that, you know the story of Joseph, when the 10 brothers go to Egypt. Joseph's already in Egypt. They need corn. The 10 brothers go.
And they leave Benjamin
behind.
Right.
And they say to Joseph, this is our... And he said, well, do you have another brother? And he said, yes. There is my father has one more child, so same word, still at home. He is a little one. And so you've got this combination of little and child again.
But he's not little, is he?
But later on in the year, he's able to ride to Egypt with the brothers, or a year later he's able to ride and give an account of himself. So that helps.
So there might not necessarily be little children that we might think of little children.
Yes.
It could be a bit older.
Yeah.
But
still not adults.
Still not
by any
adults. But it did strike me that how did 2 bears kill 42 of them? Yeah. And I just thought...
They were she-bears, so I don't know whether that helps. Are they more deadly?
LP. No, but I just thought, surely if 2 bears come out striking you, then you run, you scarper. But it just came to me that it sounds like 42 of them, it doesn't say died, got torn.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So they could have been...
Sounds pretty serious.
Quite serious, but it sounds like, are these sort of arrogant, cocky kids that just go, 42 of us, we can fight them. Yeah. We can beat a bear. If you think of Samson killing a lion with his bare hands, they think, 42, we can probably kill a couple of bears, or at least 21 each. 21, and it made me just think that there's it's not explicitly stated there in text that they fought them, but
no.
I just thought, how does a bear kill? If it's 21 each? How do they do that if the kids are scarpering as soon as these bears come out, or even with one claw? So I kind of got that they were sort of arrogant, aggressive kids.
It's quite possible.
I don't know.
Yeah, and also
it's interesting.
It is an interesting story, and if they commit a sin, which it sort of seems like they do, it's abusing the prophet of God. That's their issue. And there is a lesson. I think I was listening to 1 Timothy this morning, and I'm pretty sure it's in 1 Timothy, that says, basically, rebuke not an elder, but exhort him as a brother. And I'm not making a direct line between prophets in the Old Testament and elders in the New Testament. But they should not have spoken to him that way because of the station that he had. And I think there's a lesson.
Even though he's bald.
Even though he is bald, yeah.
Okay.
So I think there's probably a lesson for us in it.
So we might do some more of these funny little stories, or maybe even got some value out of that. let us know what you think of that story. That's a bit of an odd one. Or if there's any stories you want us to cover, please drop a like, hit subscribe, ask us some questions and comments down below as to what you think of that. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.